And welcome back to Backspace Academy. In this section on identity and access management, I'm going to talk about security. And this is a subject that comes up a lot whenever you talk about the cloud, whenever you talk about AWS, the question of security always comes up. I'll talk about a shared responsibility model. So AWS has a massive amount of security services available and a large number of security features that create a really great offering for us. It is up to us to use that wisely. So for example, we might have our S3 or our simple storage service bucket locked down that people can't have access to by default. But we could go and grant a user full access to that. And then we could have consequences from doing that if we didn't trust that user, for example. So we need to create users and we need to assign individual permissions for users that grant least privilege. And we can also grant privileges to groups of users so that we don't have to do this on an individual basis. But what about if we have a website that has millions of users? How do we manage that? So then we'll talk about identity federation and how can we manage very large numbers of users to get access to our account. We'll also talk about Active Directory and LDAP and how do we integrate our existing systems for identity and access management into AWS's identity and access management. So we'll discuss those high-level issues around in the IAM lecture, and then we'll go into an IAM hands-on session on creating users, creating groups of users, creating roles. Then we'll look at the AWS Trusted Advisor, and what that is a service. It's an expert system service that will analyze our AWS account, and it will advise us on ways that we can improve security, on ways that we can reduce costs, on ways that we can improve the performance of our infrastructure. And that's a very good service, and it's a service that you should run on a regular basis. So we'll go through and use that service and we'll see how that actually works. And then once we've done that, we've got a pretty good understanding of the features of IAM. Then we can look at the best practices that AWS recommend for using IAM. And we'll go through those and we'll make sure that you fully understand those. And then at the end of that, we're going to have a learning by quizzes section. So you need to get the Identity and Access Management User Guide because that will be the reference material for the learning by quizzes. So the way the learning by quizzes works is that AWS expect you to read a large amount of documentation, and that's difficult. So what we've done is we've extracted the important pieces and the little nuggets of knowledge that you need to know, and we've put them in a series of quizzes. And so if you have a look at those quizzes, and if you can memorize the answers to those quizzes, and not only that, understand why the answers to those quizzes are correct, then you're going to be in a good position to follow one and do an AWS exam. Because it's one thing to understand how to use a service, it's one thing to understand how and why you use that service, but there's always going to be these curveballs that AWS will throw at you just to make sure that you've read their documentation thoroughly. So without any further ado, we'll get into this identity and access management. Let's go.